Okay. Hi, Carl. How you doing
Hi,
tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for joining me tonight. I know it's
Thanks for
a
inviting me.
oh, hey, that's all right. I'm absolutely I'm so happy to have you on here and um to hear your journey and your story. Um we have had a little kind of brief chat before we got in here, and you've really alluded to some things actually already, which I'm so interested to hear about in your journey and all that, as to why you want to share. So, Carl, can you tell us um, uh, what makes, why are you sitting here next in front of me on this Zoom? Um, what, tell me about Carl. What's going on? You're a
Um,
dad. What's happening here?
I'm a dad, yeah. My wife, who's an American, and we got married 13 years ago, I think. Um, and we moved to Japan about a year after we were married. And part of our journey has been infertility. Um, we don't know exactly why, but we've been married 13 years and haven't had any biological kids. She's been to the doctor. Doctor doesn't really know. It might be endometriosis. She has those symptoms. But the problem is that in order to be diagnosed, um, officially, they have to do exploratory surgery.
Mm,
Not something that we're very much interested in. And so we just assume endometriosis. Um, and that makes it difficult to impossible to get pregnant,
right.
along with a whole host of other medical problems. Um, so my, my we say that my wife is the gas pedal and I'm the brake.
I like that.
Yeah,
That that's a great phrase. My
yeah.
wife's the gas
She,
pedal, I'm the brake. That sounds
she has the ideas and she wants to go for them, and I go, okay, well, wait, let's slow down. And then and the marriage is all about finding not balance, but like whose voice should reign at a particular time. Sometimes you need the gas pedal to go, and sometimes you
yep.
need the brake just to pump things down.
Yep.
Um,
No, no, absolutely.
but
That's
it
what a
was
good
her
marriage
idea.
is, man. That's what a good
Yeah,
marriage, good
yeah,
relationship is, you know.
yeah. So she had the idea first to adopt, and
Okay.
I didn't want to give up hope that we would have a biological kid. So I was resistant at first.
Okay.
Um,
That must have been kind of, I'm just going to jump in there. Sorry, Carl. That
yeah,
must have been
no.
kind of um, like a kind of one of those decisions in your life, isn't it? Where you're like,
Mhm.
okay, a tough one, but something you had to make, right?
Yeah,
Okay. The adoption route, you know, you got to be on board with it, haven't you?
yeah. And that's something that she and I both have noticed throughout our marriage is that the 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 correct answer is usually the one that we both agree on. Um, Very rarely is one of us right and the other wrong.
Mm,
Um, and that comes through a lot of talking and communication, and not a small amount of humility on
mm,
everyone's part. But we weren't in sync, and we want to be in sync when we make decisions.
mm,
And so she very respectfully did not push. She said,
yep.
I think adoption would be a good idea. And I was, in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, but I want to have a child. Like, I want
Mm,
this new person to be from me. I want them to be like me. I want them to be like us. This amalgamation of the two of
mm,
us put together and brought forth into the world.
yeah.
Um, that's what I wanted, and and so I think that lasted a few months, and then I was watching a video at our church, and I don't even remember what the video was, but it was about adoption. And at the end of the video, I was just like, okay, I'm on board.
Mm.
Um,
What was it in the
and
video that like made that happen?
I don't remember.
No, just some, just
I don't remember at all. I don't
Something
remember.
clicked.
Something clicked. There was something happened in my head, um and yeah, it just happened. And so I went to her and I was like, okay, I'm on board with this. And so we started looking into it. We found an organization up in Shizuoka called Aino Keshin, which is loving decisions in Japanese.
Right.
And it's a missionary family who it's a nonprofit. They offer to pay for the mother's entire medical bill, her whole hospital stay, everything,
Right.
out of pocket, and then bring the child into their home to foster.
Right.
And then they hold the child until they can find a family to then come and adopt, and then just require the adopting family to pay what they paid for the medical bills. So it's much, much cheaper than going through like the government.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So because their support, what they live on comes from churches in America and private donors and things like that. So that's how they're able to provide this service at cost.
Gotcha.
And the process was it was not long, but it was still lengthy. There was a lot of paperwork to do. She interviewed us both individually and then as a couple.
Okay.
There was a home study, I believe. She came just to see how the house was. I think, if I remember correctly, it was like 2 months.
Wow.
From the time that we started the adoption process till when we actually picked up our son.
Wow. And so that was when you first started the adoption, like just saying, okay, we want to be part of kind of, bringing this into our lives. So 2 months from basically that to actually having the first of your adopted children come into your family.
Yeah. So it was a pretty fast deal. And that was our son. Our daughter came 3 years later, even though we started the adoption process almost immediately after we adopted our son, because as I'm sure you're aware of, many kids who are born with Down syndrome have heart defects.
Yeah.
My son was born with 2 very small holes that have since more or less sealed back up. When my daughter was born, she, as I understand it, she basically had no chambers in her heart.
Wow.
It was just kind of open. And she had 3 or 4 heart surgeries, open heart surgeries, before she was 3. Yeah.
So she was when she was like that age, she was in like a foster care situation?
It was the same organization. It was Aino Keshin, which was this fostering organization.
Right.
Yeah, when we first saw her, she had stringy hair, terrible skin, a severe lactose allergy. Not lactose intolerance, an allergy to it. If it even touched her tongue, it would swell. And taking formula meant a trip to the hospital. She had her multiple heart surgeries, where they basically took tissue from another part of her body and made a new valve. After that, then the doctor eventually cleared her to come to our house to live with us. And after fixing her heart, her skin cleared completely up, hair started to grow nice and strong, and her allergy cleared up.
Wow, there we go.
It was a bizarre
Fantastic
thing. Yeah. So
can I go back a little bit to the decision for you guys to adopt a Down syndrome child, your daughter, the first of the 2. what, how did the thought and the process of going, okay, let's adopt a child that has Down syndrome, that has
Mhm.
Down syndrome. How did that get into the whole equation? I'd like to know.
I remember very clearly we were sitting in our apartment at the time. My wife was at the coffee table doing the paperwork, and I was off doing something else. And she calls me over and she says, there's a question here with a box, and it says, the question is are you willing to adopt a child with special needs?
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, just so everyone's listening, this is actually a we're in Japan. This is like a Japanese system, right? So it's all in Japanese, by the way, isn't it? This form?
No, this was through the organization Aino Keshin. So it was all in English.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was okay. So it was pretty clear then what was going on, and
It was clear. It was very clear.
With it.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's that box.
Here's that box.
Okay.
And she looks up at me and I look down at her and I shrug and I go, I mean, we wouldn't have the option if we were having a biological kid. And she's like, yeah, that's true. Like, so yeah, we'll be willing to adopt a kid with special needs. And she ticked the box, and
that is one hell of a tick, I'd say.
It's
that is a massive tick, man, because
yeah.
And I'm getting tingles, man, because it takes a lot of people like ourselves. We don't have that box to tick. There's not a, it's like, this is what's going to happen, like you said before, right? And to open yourself up to be vulnerable and be like, well, let's do this, because like, if we're gonna do it the whole way as what we can do it, then we tick the box. Then we need to just be all in.
Yeah.
And full credit to you, Carl, because that, I'll be honest, I don't know if I could tick it. I'm going to be really honest about it. I don't know if I could, like, with.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think I would have, if I knew then what I knew now, I would have paused a little longer. But I still would have ticked it because one of our friends, our very good friends, who's my college roommate, and he lives just a couple of stations down from us. He said something pretty profound that changed our perspective on adoption. He said, be careful that you aren't adopting in order to fill a hole in yourselves. Make sure that you're adopting because the kids need to be adopted. It's like, that's kind of the whole point. And that
raises more questions, doesn't it, for you?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like, and it obviously, it allows you to get sometimes a lot more perspective really quickly, doesn't it? I guess it does.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people tend to look at parenthood from the outside in incorrectly. And then when they enter into parenthood, it can distort your perspective on parenthood. And that's, what's the role? Why are you becoming a parent? Are you becoming a parent because children are just beautiful and awesome, and you want love and life in your own life, and you'll get this so much love and attention back to you? It's like, no. No, that is not how this happens. It's not how this works. That's not how it works with typical kids. It's not how it works with
that's
kids with Down syndrome. It does not work. You do not get back what you put in. I'm never going to get the sleep that I've lost. I'm never going to get back the money that I lost taking care of these kids. My stress level is constantly high. I used to be a pretty chill, roll with punches kind of guy. It turns out I'm a huge ball of anxiety when my child is crossing the street. It is absolutely devastating becoming a parent.
Yeah.
But it's not about me.
Yeah. you know, I'm just going to dive off on a slight tangent here because
Yeah.
I actually think you have something really quite poignant here, is that when we become dads, let's talk about dads because we are dads. We're not mothers.
Yeah.
We're dads, right?
Right,
So
right. Yeah.
we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
Like, is that it is generally when you become a dad, however you become a dad, is that it actually is a very you have zero idea as to what your job is,
Zero.
and you don't, you're going into it pretty much with you have kind of some kind of expectation as to kind of what you think it's going to be like, because you've got other people around you who are dads. But then when you become one, is that you are just like, you're like, it is very I use, sometimes it can be very traumatic, even with just having a child, a typical child,
Yeah.
whatever they are. And I think that's something that is heightened when we have children with special needs, disabilities, and additional needs.
Yeah.
That is heightened. And that, I think, is always so important to talk about. And that's
And it's elongated too. It's not just heightened, it's elongated. My son is all but nonverbal. And so we had a bit of a and that is such a huge thing, because last week he came home with bruises on his ears, really small bruises right here and right here. And those weren't play bruises. These were what we assume was inflicted by an adult.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He came home from school with these 2 bruises, and we talked to the school the next day, and they did their best. They talked to all of the students, they talked to all of the teachers. No one saw anything, and so there was nothing that we can do. And we don't hold any grudges against the school. They did their fair duty. They did what was right. They took pictures. They took this seriously, but logistically, there's nothing that they can do. And Sam can't. Or sorry, I just said it. My son can't say anything.
Yeah,
he can't say anything.
No, they can't. And that is, and there are parents out there listening right now, dads listening, mums listening, and they feel like you, extremely helpless, and because they would love to know, and they would love to be able to kind of have that communication back about these things, like, and I've had that with Jamie many a time. Like, comes back and it's like a bruise here and a scratch there, and it's like, where the hell does this come from? Like, and it's like, okay, well, maybe has he fallen over or something, and like, and you just, you're in the dark. Basically, you're so much of the time you're in the dark as to what goes on when they walk out your door and when they go to school, right? And when they are in an environment where you're not there, you put your faith as a dad and as a parent into the care of someone else, right? And then when it comes back, you're like, well, that shit wasn't there when they went out the door this morning.
Yeah.
And as a dad, you feel like it's that thing kicks in of like, well, I want to do something about this. I want to, like, do you have that? Do you have that kind of thing? Like, okay, I'm like, it's the dad thing. Like, oh, what, like, you want to try and get to the bottom of it or something. Do you have that kind of inside you?
Oh. Yeah. But it was a far more violent impulse than that, to be honest. And I'm not joking. I was my wife talks about being a mother bear, and going to war for her kids, and she absolutely does, in a very mom way. Like, she will stand up, she'll verbally fight back, and I have to kind of stand back and kind of hold my hands together and calm myself down, because I could I could very easily just switch on, because these are they're my, I chose these guys, these two people to be in my life, and they and they're getting they're getting hurt, or when they get hurt, it's they can't defend themselves, and the only thing that I can do is, the only thing that I'm allowed to do is stand and watch, because I can't do what I feel like I want to do, which is to jump in there and get physical. You know, I know I hesitate to say wrong, but it's not done.
Yeah.
And so I hold back, and that's what I'm supposed to do. But that's the hard thing, is going back to what you were saying about being a dad, and you're like, you don't know what you're doing in the beginning. And it's very true. I think a mom's duties and responsibilities and their roles in their kids' lives are so well defined from the time that they're conceived. It's like her whole body turns into a baby making machine. Every craving, the body will literally destroy itself trying to keep the baby alive. And then after the baby's born, it's like, it's the mom's responsibility. She's hardwired to care for this baby's every single need.
Yeah.
She starts producing milk. All of her hormones are directed towards the baby. And so obviously it's the mom's job as a mom to nurture and to provide sustenance and care for the child. Our roles are not so biologically defined. Because
do you think though, and I agree with you on that. I do agree with you on that, Carl. I wonder, like, there is something, like, I really feel that for myself, like, I started to last kind of 2 years, I started to unlock myself. Actually, that's a big phrase for me. I haven't used that before, but unlock how I want to be as a dad, how I really want to be this dad who is loving, nurturing, and not kind of afraid to show my real genuine love and affection for my boys.
Yeah.
And I felt like, I think I used to do this a lot easier when they were younger. And as they've kind of got older, is that I found it more difficult. Because I was like, because the mum, like, you know, I was like, well, not what a man does. It's not what a father does. It's kind of like, you know, making myself look like I'm, you know, I'm affectionately kind of hugging my kids, and, you know, and I just like I started to kind of unlock myself and be like, and a lot of I relate it to actually is a toxic side of the masculinity that we feel as men. And that's what, like, there's parts of that. It's not everything to do with that, but there's parts of that. And so I now am just so much more affectionate with my kids than what I was 2 years ago. And what I've noticed is that in doing this, is that my kids, especially my youngest one, Joshua, I have noticed a massive change and a massive shift to him, to spending more, kind of want to be around me more. Communication wise, like that's kind of it's improved dramatically.
Mm.
And it's, but it's one of those things, kind of, I've kind of dragged it away a little bit there, but it is the father's kind of position or role, or yes, it is different from a mum's, but it's also, we define that as who we are ourselves, don't we? We let ourselves kind of build that, like, to what we feel that it should be.
Yeah.
I really think that.
Yeah.
I suppose it's, when your child comes home and you're like, you like, you feel, because you are like the guardian. You're kind of, it's your child for you, right? You're like, okay, I've adopted this child into our family.
Mm-hmm.
So they are part of your family.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to protect them,
Mm-hmm.
don't you? And you want to be,
yeah. Let me, I just want to make sure that I'm not misunderstood. When I was saying that that father's role is not so biologically defined, what I meant is that it's very easy from a biological standpoint to see what a mother does.
Yeah.
Not so easy with dads, which is the difficult part of being a father, is that in a lot of ways, you're right. It comes down to what kind of dad do you want to be.
Do you think the expectation of a dad is like, the expectation is like, what is that? What is that to you? What's the expectation?
I mean, that's a large question in and of itself, because the first part that you have to ask is, whose expectation are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about society's expectations. It's like, well, okay, well, what defines society? How big is the society? Is it is it the whole country? Is it your culture's expectations for what a father is, or is it well, in America, it's the state, or is it the cities, or is it the neighborhood, or is it your whole family, your extended family, or is it your own family, or is it your expectations? And I mean, so that's one level of analysis to that question. Then the other question is what are those expectations then? So I know, being from America, what is, let's just say, American expectations? What's the American culture's expectations for a father?
Okay, because like, that's pretty much, let's go with that.
Yeah, I can't define it because there's so many different cultures in America. I grew up in the South, which tends to be more conservative, and so there was a lot of the kind of typical masculine fathers out there.
So the provider, right?
Okay, well, let's go with that. What do I mean by that? That's a spectrum as well, because there were big manly men out there who were not gentle to their children, who were what we would call today toxic to their kids. And there were other men out there who hunted and fished and loved their kids to death and showed affection and actually fathered their kids. So I think I think when it comes to expectations, you have to realize that if you're feeling an expectation placed on yourself, it might not be you might be misperceiving it.
Mm,
So for example, if my wife has if I think that my wife has an expectation for myself, well, there's two actors in that.
mm,
There's her, and then there's me. And I can only see reality from my perspective. So what it might be is that my wife has an expectation, but I'm misinterpreting that expectation. So that's
mm,
where communication has to come in, which is why when you're talking about expectations, you have to narrow it down
mm.
as small as possible.
Yeah.
And
And
for
pull it to
me,
pieces. Basically, you have to really
yeah,
pull it to pieces and analyze it, don't you?
yeah.
And I,
So for me, it's my family, it's my wife,
mm,
and it's the very, very close friends that I have around me, like the three guys that I know.
mm,
That's the subset of society that I listen to.
mm. Yeah, yeah,
And I don't listen to some random person on the internet going on about, how to be a good father. I
yeah.
don't listen to the culture, especially Japanese culture about fathers. It's like, that's just garbage. Um,
That's a whole episode
and
right there. But
that's that. Oh my gosh, we could go on and
well,
on
I
and
mean,
on about that.
okay. I don't want to. I don't like really Japan bashing on this because I mean,
No, we live here, and my
but
kids are
let's give
Japanese.
people an
So
insight. Carl, let's give people an insight to this because I think there are people out there who have no idea
yeah,
what it is, what a typical father's role is in this country, and I relate it to a father's role of like what it was like, like winding back the years on this, man. I mean, it's I think it's like 30, 40 years behind everywhere, like behind like the expectation
Mhm.
that what the father is expected to do and be part of in a family that is having just got like typical children.
Mhm.
um what yeah, that man, it is so different from a Western
It is.
from like
It Historically speaking, like back in the Meiji era, fathers would or men would marry women and get them pregnant, and then move to one of the big cities. I think in the Meiji era, I think it was Kyoto. That was the main capital, the political
yeah.
capital, and that's what the expectation was.
Mm,
And the wife was left to run the house,
mm,
and then the Meiji Restoration hit, and it became more Western, but it still maintained that dynamic to a
mm,
large extent. And then in the 80s, when Japan hit their economic boom,
mm,
you had men who were taking advantage of the economy at that time, and like, they would live in, well, around me, Nara, and then they would have a family in Nara, and then they would travel to Tokyo, which is
mm,
like, at that time, I mean, I think they had the Shinkansen, so it's like maybe 4 hours, 5 hours.
mm.
Um, and so they would stay there, like a month, and then
Yeah,
maybe come back on a weekend, on a
yeah.
3-day weekend, visit, and then go back.
And that still happens here.
And that still happens here.
That still
That still
happens,
happens.
right?
It's crazy. And like, yeah, and so yeah, and then people from the West are like, that's nuts. Why? Like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? But
Yep.
I'm talking about the cultural expectation.
Mm.
Japan being very collectivist, they're like, well, that's just what we do.
I like. I always like to kind of give examples of this, and I'm here to like when I go to the park, when I go like when there's like an event, like sometimes there's like you know a group of kind of families are getting together for like a local area kind of event, right? And sometimes it's like a classic example is
Mhm.
fireworks they do like in
Mhm.
summer here. So
Mhm.
it's like in an evening, of course, and so roll down to the park, and the kids are there, and there's maybe like I don't know, let's say like 20 families. Okay, I only see I'm one of the dads that turns up, and there is probably only one or two more other fathers that turn up. Right, and this is in the evening.
Mhm.
We're in a metropolitan area here. I'm in the middle of Osaka essentially,
Mhm.
and there's like two. I generally there's me and another guy by default, Japanese guy, and that is it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, this is. I always find myself like thinking, I'm a minority. I'm a
Mhm.
minority as it is as a foreigner, but it's like a minority, even more so as a dad kind of showing up. And I'm like, I have to. I feel weird, but I have to congratulate myself on this of actually being there. But it's like
Right.
this is normal.
That's the base.
This
like
is the
base
basics of
fatherhood
being
right
a
there.
dad, like turning
Yeah.
up on a Friday night or
Uh-huh.
Saturday night and doing fireworks with the local kids, like showing up.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, probably dad is either, working in Kyoto or possibly even Tokyo, or they're working at the office until whatever time. I think I'm just to give context. I'm in the prefecture next to you in Nara,
Yep.
Which is way more country.
Yes.
And so I think there's actually more dads that will show up to events.
Right.
I've never felt kind of by
Oh,
myself.
that's interesting, actually. Yeah, there might be that's actually, well, that's good. That's great.
Yeah. But still, I still see way more way more mothers than I do see fathers.
Yeah.
Out and about. To a point where it does warm my heart when I see a dad like by himself just carrying his kid,
Yeah.
around in the grocery store or out for a walk or something like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
good for you, Dad. I know that's not really your culture, but fantastic, good for you. Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about culture and expectations, it's the expectation for the Japanese dad to work, and it's the Japanese expectation for the mother to care for the kids.
Yes.
And
it's the raising, isn't it? I mean, that's a big thing. I had a talk with one of my students about this. She's like, the job of the mother is to raise the child. And I was like, yeah, that's actually really interesting. And I said, do you feel immense amount of pressure on yourself to do that? Because that's on her. And she said, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's this massive societal pressure on her to kind of provide and to give those things to her child that and her husband is on the scene. He actually lives in a different part of Japan. He pops down and says hello. But the pressure on her, she feels this immense pressure on her to do like what she can. And so it was very interesting for me to kind of get that, understand that. Anyway, Carl, I want to bring it back to you.
Yeah.
Do you feel sometimes that you are not enough as a dad to your two kids?
I mean, if you want to ask me an easy question, go right ahead. I don't even know how to begin to answer that question. Part of it rolls back to those expectations. Because what do I expect myself to be as a dad? Do I expect myself to be perfectly patient, perfectly amiable all the time? Do I expect myself to come home from work, from a job that is an absolute drain on me, and do I expect myself to then have 100% energy to play with my kids and to deal with them? No, I do not.
No.
It's a negotiation between me and life, I guess. So I don't feel enough. I don't feel, how did you phrase it? Do I feel like I'm good enough
as a dad? Yeah.
As a dad.
To your two children with Down syndrome.
No, there are times where I lose my patience. there's times where I've not wanted to deal with them. And I look at my wife and the same thing happens. You know, there's times where she doesn't want to deal with it. And those are times where you just have to have a lot of grace with yourself. Because you're like, I cannot handle him yelling at me, because that's the only way that he can communicate. All that he can communicate is, I'm upset. Now guess why I'm upset. And if you guess wrong, I'm going to be more upset. If you guess correctly, I will remain at the same level. And that's it. And you just got to have grace with yourself when you're hitting those limits and go, I am tired and I'm about to explode.
Yeah.
And for me personally, maybe it happens with you, but for me personally, when I am that gracious to myself and that honest, and I say, I can't do this, I cannot handle him, I usually am able to find just a little bit more with inside myself to handle it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not the best way, but I do find a little bit more strength every time. Not a lot, barely enough, but always
it's
enough.
hard, right? It's hard.
It's hard. Of course it is. You're dealing with people unfiltered. I mean, people talk about Down syndrome kids. Oh, they're just angels, aren't they? They're just so happy all the time. It's like, really? Yeah. Is that what you think?
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen a sit strike where your son crossing the crosswalk wants something suddenly and just sits down in the middle of the road? And you're like, my son's about to be hit by a car today because he wanted something on the sidewalk. He wanted a piece of grass and we walked past it. And it's like, no, kids with Down syndrome are not angels. They're not little tiny treasures.
They're human.
They are people.
They are people and they're human and they have these emotions, right?
They have emotions and it's unfiltered.
Yep.
Especially my son. My son, we're pretty sure the thing with boys and ADHD, and you probably already know this, boys with Down syndrome, is that they usually have ADHD, and they usually have either autism or autistic tendencies.
Yeah.
With the ADHD, what you're getting is these massive emotional spikes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where they go from absolute, like, where they're pretty placid to all of a sudden just out of this, just skyrocketing. And it can be just they're super happy, and it's like, yeah, you're in a good mood, or angry, or grumpy, or tired. They're completely unfiltered. And that
is a real world challenge for you and I and other guys who are listening to this, because we are in those situations. We are continuously on what I call high alert. It is like you are just that high alert like is really tiring.
Yeah.
It is so tiring because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't, and so you can't let your guard down. You can't. It's very hard for you to let your kind of defenses down. I find that hard.
Yeah.
And I have to actually just sometimes, I don't do this enough, as I need to kind of just check myself because I operate at that kind of like that level so much. I'm like, Steve, just come on, just bring it down a notch. Just bring it down. Like, don't be human to yourself for about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And consciously doing that has a positive effect.
Yeah.
And it is very, very hard. And yeah, I mean, they are adorable kids, but they are also very, like you say, they have personalities and they have these other things going on, which make things more tricky for us as dads. because we're like, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
like you look at other dads who have neurotypical kids, um, and it's not to compare or to say that one's better than the other, but they have they have a pretty good foundation for being a dad. If they had a good dad who was present and available
yep.
Emotionally, then they're just like, well, I'll just copy that. That's probably too simplistic, but at least they have that. And it'd be like, oh, I'll just act like my dad in this situation.
Mm,
Can't do that with our guys
no.
because I didn't have Down syndrome when I was a kid,
Mm,
and no one in my family has Down syndrome, and so I didn't get to see my dad deal with sit strikes in the middle of the road, or the fact that going to the park for other people is very relaxing, and for us it's incredibly stressful.
mm.
You have to keep your eye on the kid the whole time. You can't have a conversation with other parents because your kid
It's like,
might all of a sudden bolt into the road.
yeah, it's like having a really active 3-year-old, like
Yeah.
with who would just bolt, or 2-year-old, even 2-year-old, just go any which way. And yes, that's kind of how I think I relate it sometimes. Like, you just, because that's what you like when you've got those when you have like I'd say a kind of a typical 2 or 3-year-old who's just walking, who's learned to walk and will just bolt, right?
Yeah.
No idea of, no concept of danger.
Yeah.
And man, okay, this is interesting. Okay, what's your biggest fear at the moment as a dad?
Keep asking these easy questions. My biggest fear as a dad. Good grief. I did not anticipate that question at all. My biggest fear as a dad. That that yeah, I think once I answer this, you'll ask me, what do you mean? And I won't know what I mean. But my biggest fear is failing as a dad.
Yep.
So what's the question? So obviously the next question is what does failure look like?
Well, what does success look like? Let's look at the other side. What does success look like?
Okay, that's much easier for me. That's a much easier question. Do people like your kids? Oh, well, an easier question is, do you like your kid? Do you like your kids? Because if you like your kids, and I mean like, I don't mean just tolerate. I mean, do you like? Do you like hanging out with your kids? Do you look forward to hanging out with your kids? Not because it's the expectation, but because your kids are fun. Like they got good personalities, and they have good sense of humor, and they're not annoying, and they don't bug you.
Yeah.
Did you then okay, I would count that as a success. If you like your kids and your kids are generally liked by others, you did it. That's all, because that's all you have to do. You just have to get your kids to a point where they can function in society. And that's true of neurotypicals, and that's true of neurodivergence. So then I guess failure would look like you don't like your kids. And it's like, and maybe some people out there will be like, how could you not like your kids? I see it. I teach 5 and 6 year olds. And I see moms who just do not like their kids. They cannot wait until their kids are dropped off. And then I look at the way that the kids act towards their teachers and towards me, one of their teachers, and as their moms. And it's like, you're annoying. You're super annoying. And you don't play well with other kids. And you're not going to do well in the future. And that's because whoever's raising them, probably mom, maybe not dad, did the easy things when things were tough. Rather than parenting, they took the easy way out. They put them in front of a screen or gave them whatever they wanted just so that they'd stop talking, so they'd shut up. didn't teach him manners, didn't teach him how to talk to people, even in a kind, even in a generally respectful way. Didn't teach him how to wait, things like that. And in that way, I guess parenting is easy. You just get your kids to a point where you like them and other people like them. And when you do that, you did a good job. You succeeded. But
sometimes
it's
sometimes
complicated.
it's complicated, and sometimes it's that's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Because I think we
absolutely.
like, and it is very, everyone has a very different kind of view of that as well, because it's,
and should, because that's
Yeah.
how, because you can't have, there's no way that there's one standard definition, a monolithic definition of success in parenthood, because the success that you and I will experience with our kids with Down syndrome is very, very different than what other people, than what neurotypicals are going to experience. My daughter will probably be the one that, of our two kids, she'll be the one that has the most likely chance of leaving the house. Probably not my son. He'll probably be with us forever. And that doesn't even occur to people with neurotypical kids.
Yeah.
So okay, so then what's Sammy's success look like? Okay, well, he's probably not going to go out and change the world. Fine. Okay. How about he's just a really good worker and people can depend on him and rely on him and like him. Okay. That's doable. That's manageable. That's a manageable expectation. He doesn't have to exceed expectations from the culture. He doesn't have to go out and do something amazing. He just has to be likable, dependable, someone that, because I mean, that's way more, that's much more of a success story than someone who has achieved some goal and yet is disliked.
Yeah. Yep.
That doesn't, So,
wow.
So if you or people who are listening to this are struggling with that, feeling that their kids are inadequate and that they may be failing as a parent, it's like, okay, we'll just take a step back, define what success looks like, seriously define what success looks like. And if you can't define what success looks like, define failure and then flip it. That's probably what success is. And then use your creativity and what you've learned to support your child in such a way that they have the best chance of meeting that success. And understand, especially with kids with special needs, that there are degrees of success. You can shoot towards, we're hoping that my daughter will be able to leave the house and be independent on her own. Hope so. I hope so. I really hope so. We're supporting her, and we're going to do our best to get her to that point. But maybe she can't, So
do you worry like that? That's an interesting thing, because I've talked about this with other guests, is like worrying about the future, like, which is something that a lot of dads kind of they get very worried about, or not, and they're very focused on the future, but not on the present, not on what's really going on now. And I don't know, what's your where are you at with that?
Without having talked to the other men that you've talked to, I would wonder if thinking about the future isn't being confused with being anxious about the future, because that's very different. That's a whole different thing. I would say that I'm concerned with the future. I looked, like I said, I looked at my two kids and tried to imagine what is the best possible life that they could feasibly achieve.
Mm,
And but then after that, after defining those terms, I then said, okay, what can I do today
mm,
to help them achieve that? It makes
yeah,
life, it makes breaking that down into these little bite-sized pieces
yeah,
rather than just trying to consume the whole
yeah. Because it's
thing. Just
that's so hard. That is
yeah,
so hard.
just break it down. Like absolutely look at the whole picture first. Figure out what do you think your kid is going to be able to do feasibly,
Mm,
and then like, okay, now that that's defined, okay, break it down, like bring it way, way down and ask yourself, okay, today, right now, what is something that I could do that would help him or her get to that get
mm,
to that version of success.
mm,
um and I want to say that, I mean, I'm serious. Like if it helps you, write it down,
mm.
get out a notebook, write,
Yeah,
this is what I want for my kid,
mm,
break it down, into blocks,
yeah,
in 10 years, this is what I want. And then in 10 years after that, this is where they should be. And then 10 years after that, you have a 30-year
mm,
plan, and then you break it all down. Okay, hey, here's a step by step, year by year, and then month by month. And then, or if that's too much, it would be too much for me, then just look at today. Just look at now. What is the now, right now,
mm.
your son or your daughter needs something.
Yeah, and that I think is like for myself personally. That's what I do.
Mhm.
I uh, I focus on to how I am, as as a human, as first as a human. I'd be human to myself, and then I'm like, if I be human to myself, and it increases the odds of me having better reactions, reacting better to certain situations, and that is so important. And
Yeah.
I suppose the question I want to ask you is like, how do you, as a dad, with all these stresses and anxieties and pressures of operating on this level where we never thought we would, really, we never thought we'd operate on this kind of like anxiety level,
Mhm.
of worrying kind of what's happening next. Um, what I've lost my question. It's just vanished from my head now.
Like,
um oh, what was it? It
but
was
it sounded like maybe like, what do I do?
yes. Sorry, I've got it now.
Okay.
What how do you ground yourself with all the stuff that's going on in your world, and all the things that are piled on, the work, the dad role, the husband, like juggling things that are going on in your world? How do you ground yourself so you can make it through the day, so you can get up, so you can be operational, be the best dad that you want to be? How do you do it? And this is so important, because I think the guys out there, I didn't do this for 11 years. I didn't look after myself for 11 years. And I don't want guys to do the same shit that happened to me for 11 years. And I think it's so important that we hear it, because we don't know. We don't know as guys how to look after ourselves. And I get so passionate about this because it's my real experience, and I'm able to reflect on this and look at it. And that's why I'm like, that's why I do this goddamn podcast, is because we need to hear the voices of guys like you. We need to hear them. So
Yeah.
how do you do it? How do you relax? How do you disengage yourself?
Well, I have a bit of a, uh, it's I have a bit of a trickier situation with that. I have ADHD. Um, and so I can't relax. I just don't. Because typically relaxing is you're sitting down and, reading a book, having a coffee, something like that. I get bored. It stresses me out.
Yeah.
So I have to go do something. I have to go learn something. I have to go engage in some activity. But that's not relaxing. That's just more. That's just more stress. I have like 4 or 5 different hobbies that I'm currently engaged in. I'm in the middle of 3 different books.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah, and this is so. I have a neurological condition where is it neurological?
I don't know, mate. I honestly,
Yeah,
I'm not going to correct you on that because I'm like, yeah.
physiological. I have a physiological
Yeah.
inability to relax.
Mm.
It just does not work for me.
Have
Okay,
you always been like that?
Yeah. I was diagnosed with ADHD pretty young, before it was cool to have ADHD back in
Mm.
the early 90s. And I was never medicated, which was something I'm very happy about.
Mm.
But it as an adult, I okay, so a little bit about that. I always tried to work like everybody else in life. Like, okay, so people sit down and they study in college for 3 hours
Mm.
straight. It's easy for them. 20 minutes into studying for me, I'm reading webcomics for the next 2 hours. And
It sounds a lot like me.
completely lose track of time. Not
Right.
realize it until I look out the window and it's dark. And I'm like, I just wasted the whole afternoon not studying.
Mm.
And then, but it's only been recently, within the past, I'd say 2 or 3 years, that I've actually treated myself like someone who has ADHD. So kind of something similar to your story where you were burning yourself out for 11 years.
Mm.
I was treating myself, I was expecting myself to be like the other guys in my life who are good with money, detail oriented, generally focused.
Mm.
They have their hobby, the thing that they do.
Yep.
And it stressed me out to the point of deep depression, to be open and honest, some suicidal thoughts, because I was jamming myself into a shape that I cannot fit. So then I started to treat myself as if I had ADHD, which is a whole another thing. I won't even go into those details. But when I did that, you talked about treating yourself like you're human. I treated myself as if I were neurodivergent, like my son, which fantastically links up. I get my son in a way that my wife can't, because we both have this ADHD thing. I know why it is so important for him to come home and basically take off all of his clothes except for his underwear. The reason is because someone with ADHD, when they're wearing clothes, it's like you feel all of the folds as you're walking. You're feeling the fabric all of the time. And it's like someone is just constantly tapping you all day long, getting your attention. Now, sometimes when something's more interesting, you don't think about it. But when your brain is kind of in idle mode, it's there, just that tapping, constantly tapping. So there's this low level stress, I guess, constantly feeling that. And so when my son comes home, everything comes off, because that's how he That's one of the ways that he quiets down his nervous system.
Mhm.
And so when I started treating myself as if I had ADHD, and I started to let myself have, first off, I started being more gracious with myself and saying, I don't have to be like my friends. I'm not good with money because it's lots of details and I don't do details well.
Mm.
Um, I don't have to have one hobby. I can have multiple hobbies. I should have multiple hobbies because that's the way my brain works.
Yeah.
And
So allowing yourself these
allowing
things.
being, I mean, it takes so much awareness of oneself to be able to just let go and to treat yourself that way, because especially if you have if you're neurodivergent like me, there's no handbook for it.
No.
You
And you're just kind of trying to navigate your way through it
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Thankfully, my wife is very patient with my ADHD tendencies, and is very supportive of all of my little quirks and things. But
We've been married, what is that, 13 years?
13,
Is that right?
13 years. Yeah.
Yeah, good on you, man.
Yeah.
Because it's hard work.
It's hard work. It's like parenthood. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do.
Mhm.
But there's nothing like working with someone who knows you,
Mm.
and there's nothing like working with someone who has the same goals in mind.
Mm.
That's something that I often see. I don't think it's missing, but it's difficult to have in international marriages. Between I've noticed it can be more difficult. It's not impossible at all.
It's definitely like, yeah. I mean, I don't. By personally, we don't have that problem, but I know that, yes, in marriages which culture, mixed cultural marriages, and then you add children with special needs on top of that.
Yeah.
It is any cracks in the system become bigger cracks because there's just so much more pressure on everyone.
Yeah.
And and it is, and that's where communication, I think you said before, communication is so important. But with us, generally, men, we're pretty bad communicators. We're not very good at that. I know. I've actually got a lot better than this as the years in the recent years. So I actually start to communicate much better, and I shut up more as well.
Yeah.
I just need to, because I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I think I should just listen a whole lot more than talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Having these 2 wonderful, beautiful Down syndrome children come into your lives, how's that changed you?
I drink more alcohol.
I love the honesty. I love it. Yep. Well, there we go. I mean, like,
I have to recommend a TV show to you. It's a British TV show called There She Goes.
There She Goes. Okay.
There She Goes. It's David Tennant. Plays a dad. It plays a dad of a girl with a rare genetic disorder. She's nonverbal. She's autistic.
Right.
The whole spectrum, and it's written by the writer. Had a sibling who had this disorder.
Right, okay.
So it's basically a firsthand account, and it's something like a dark comedy.
Okay.
But there was never an episode where my wife and I weren't crying.
Wow.
Because it was exactly our experiences with our kids.
Oh, that's interesting.
the joy, the stress, um, the craziness, the dark humor, the dark humor that you develop because you have to be able to laugh.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I think, yeah, the ability to laugh. When was the last time you actually properly laughed at like something?
Last time I properly laughed at something, I think was I probably laughed in general, or laughed with my kids.
Oh, I think like something that you just, yeah, I don't mind something that you even laughing
Oh,
with the kids, or
all the time. Like that happens
oh
all
wow,
of the time.
oh that's
All of
good,
the time.
oh
Yeah.
that's really good.
But it took a while to get there.
Mm,
It because as when they're babies, a baby with Down syndrome is basically a normal baby,
mm.
but it drags on.
Yes, it kind of, the
Yeah.
the standard kind of 1.5 years in turns into be like sometimes 4 or 5 year
Yeah.
marathon. Yeah.
Yep. It drags on and on and on. And you can only sustain toddlerhood for so long before it starts to get to you.
Mm.
Um, and okay, so then what happened? Like, how did I get over that stress and get to a place where I am happy
And that you can laugh.
and then I can laugh? And the answer to that is I realized, generally speaking, that fathers are the foundations of the family in a way that we bring shape to it. So, for example, every Saturday, I make pizza from scratch.
Wow.
And for supper, we sit down and we watch a movie. That was my idea.
Mm.
I wanted to do it. It's something that I can give to my kids. My son loves pizza, and I want him to anticipate it. So he sees me making it on the table, rolling out the dough, and he knows what's coming. And he gets very, very excited. And I feel so proud because it wasn't him demanding.
Is that the moment of you like being, I'm dad, I can do this.
Yeah.
I've got this covered. Like
this
is my gig right here.
That's
like,
exactly where it started, was when I started making pizza. And it doesn't have to be pizza, obviously. It has to be something that you give to your family because you want to, because you have a way that you want your family to be, to look, to shape, to act. And that's going back to the beginning of our conversation, what the role of a dad is versus what the role of a mom is. The role of the dad is, I believe, to give shape to the family, to build it, to say this is how our family is going to look. This is how our family is going to be, and that's a negotiation, of course, with the other members of the family. It's not a dictatorship at all. You have to work with the materials that you're given, and your wife needs to be a big part of that. But it's still your job. And when you do that job, and things start to come together, and you got to give it a lot of creativity, and you got to be patient and love. And I think that's, like you were talking about allowing yourself to feel affection towards your kids. The thing that I noticed growing up, this was a very early observation that I had growing up, is that it never seemed to me that a man looked more of a man when he had a feminine streak in him. And a woman never looked more womanly than when she had a masculine streak in her. And it feels to me like that's how it should. Now that I'm myself an adult, and I'm a man, and I have kids and things like that, I am the strong. I'm the strong one. I am the foundation. I am the brick. I am the boulder. I am the rock that this house is built on. And yet there are times where my kids need me to be soft.
Yeah, that's
They need
interesting. Yeah,
they
they
need to be cuddled.
they just
need
want
to be
you to be
kissed.
dad. They just want you to be dad.
They just want my son needs touch sometimes. My wife and I will be at the table, we'll be doing our own thing, and he'll just come up and just be like, hug, and climb up into our lap and just sit. And you can feel his body just relax because that's what he needed right then and there at that moment. My daughter, not a big cuddler. She doesn't like cuddling, but she does like to talk about love languages. She's words of affirmation. She loves to be told that she's pretty. She loves to be told that she's doing a good job and things like that. And so that's how I interact with her. Not so much hugging like with my son, but by telling her, I love you, princess. You're very pretty. I love your dress. Things like that.
That's cool.
So that's where the creativity comes in. Like I was talking before, you have to be creative. You have to be observant to your family.
Present.
So present. You have to be emotionally available, because one of the things apparently that is that can lead to a lot of developmental and social difficulties later on in kids is that parents aren't emotionally available during the developmental phase. I think we might call that emotionally neglectful. If you're not there, this is the way I think about it. Why do something that your kids aren't going to thank you for when they're adults? And I see this all the time. It's such a simple rule. It's hard to implement, but it's such a simple rule. And I see that all the time in my students, where their parents force them to go to, at 5 and 6, force them to go to cram school until 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And then it's off to pool. And then they're going to bed at 11 o'clock. And they're coming to my classroom with dark bags under their eyes. Or they're just out and out neglectful. They don't care about their kids. They just can't wait till their kids are in school. And I think to myself, what are you doing? Don't you realize when that kid is an adult, they're going to judge you? They're going to look back. They're going to compare their childhood to all of their friends' childhoods, and they're going to find an average childhood experience that you did not give them. And they're going to judge you for it. And they're going to condemn you for it. It's a simple idea, and yet it's so hard to implement. And so, because there's times where I've had to crack down on a bad behavior that my son or my daughter is doing.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, are your kids going to thank you for that? Probably, actually, yes. Because they'll look back and they'll go, yeah, that was probably not a good behavior, Dad. Thank you for, I feel the same way about my kids, about my parents. They crack down on certain behaviors. I'm like, I didn't like it when you did it to me, but thank you for doing that.
I think that's kind of parenting, is it? Because if something is dangerous, or it's going to cause, injury, or it's going to hurt someone else, or it's just not cool, then they kind of need to know. And that's kind of parenting, isn't it? It is. Okay. I'm going to ask you a new question, which is an easy one.
Oh, good. Thank you. Finally. Okay. Blue. My favorite color is blue.
No, it's not that easy. This question is all about music. And because for me, music, I love music, and I started a playlist on Spotify with songs, a couple of songs that people, songs that guys listen to that they like. They just, something that kind of either reminds them of their children, or gets them kind of, they just love the song, whatever. Okay. Can you tell us what song really, a couple of songs that get you going, picks you up, keeps you up, whatever?
That's a good question. I don't like music. I like songs.
How did I know you were going to say this?
So I have a playlist on my phone called Random.
Right.
It's a lot, and it goes from Coldplay to Bastille to Asian Kung Fu Generation. I've got I have an Afrikaans song here, a Russian song. Oh, here's a
Sing it.
German song.
Okay, what's a
So
go-to song? If you were like, I want to
my
listen to a good song right now, what is that?
Oh, that's at the bottom of the list. Um, Andre Bocelli is at the bottom of my list, which is the one that I've been listening to.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I think the one that I
What's
would
the name
listen
of that
to,
song?
uh, Partiro.
Okay.
But to actually answer your question in a helpful way, the while you were asking the song or while you're asking the question, because I kind of figured out where you were going. The song that kind of gets me going and helps me to kind of get ready for the day
Yep.
is is from the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, okay.
The animated, have you seen it? The animated
I'm pretty
Spider-Man
sure I
movie?
have. My son's a bit of
Okay.
a movie buff. I don't remember the song, but
It's What's Up Danger. It comes at the end.
What's Up Danger? Okay.
What's Up Danger? Um, and there's a line in there. I'm insane, but on my toes. I can keep the world balanced on my nose. I had a slumber party with all my foes. Yeah, I wear them like a badge of honor on my clothes. And it's that line, I could keep the world balanced on my nose. It's like, okay, I can do this. I get off the train at work. I can keep the world balanced on my nose. I can do this. All right,
I can do this. I got
let's
this.
do this. Yeah. So that's the song that I would go to. That's the helpful song on my
All right.
playlist.
I'm going to share mine. Shall I share mine? Because I haven't
Yeah.
shared mine on a podcast. I got two songs. One is Highway to Hell by AC/DC.
This is that dark humor that I was talking about.
Right. Okay.
We need to develop. It's like
So that's actually
we're in hell and it's on fire, but this
yeah.
is fine.
Actually, Jamie likes this song as well. Actually, I think I've played it enough times now that he likes it. And the other one is It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll, which is another AC/DC song.
Oh.
I think it is actually AC/DC. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, and that has a great, it's such a great song, because where is the top? Where the hell is the top of this? Like, there's no bloody top. Like, and so you're just always on this freaking mission of trying to find, be the top of something that is never there.
It's like being on a roller coaster that just keeps going up.
Yeah,
and
it just
up
keeps
and
on
up
going.
and up.
Those are my two, and I put those on the playlist actually, and I'll
It's awesome.
I'll throw yours on there as well.
Thanks.
Okay, here we go. Last question.
Yeah.
This is the last one. What 4 words describe your life today?
Chaotic would be one.
Mm-hmm.
Hopeful would be another.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult. Good.
Okay. That's what it's about. There it is.
Yeah.
Carl, it's been fantastic. And
real fun.
I really appreciate you sitting down with me here to talk about your life as the dad of 2 adopted children, Japanese children as well, we might add, because we haven't said that. And it's that there's just so many layers of complexity that are in this, and all credit to you and your wife, my man, because it is what an undertaking in this country, because to do it in this country, because I know what it's like living in this country. I've been here like almost 15, 16 odd years now. And I know that paperwork in this country is just to get the basic things done sometimes is just, anyway.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
adopt in this country, I just, oh my goodness me, I can't even begin to go there with how that was for you. And so good on you guys for doing it. Really good on you guys. And I'm, you know, the trials and tribulations that you've got, you know, I know at the end of the day, you know, when you're having a beer or a whiskey or whatever you're doing at the end of the day, a white wine or something, is that
Whiskey. It's whiskey.
it's whiskey, right? There
It's
it is.
whiskey.
Is that you've got to pat yourselves on the back, and you've got to be like, I'm doing the best
Yeah.
that I can. And I think as long as we keep, that's it.
Yeah. If any guys out there that are struggling with this whole thing, like, did I do a good job today? Are your kids well fed? Are they in bed asleep? That's bare minimum. Like that. If you can do that, if you can get your kids fed, washed in some degree, and in bed, you can put your stamp on today. You can do, you're done. You're good. You did the bare minimum. That's fantastic. Good job. Because sometimes that's all you can do. There are times where it feels like my wife and I finished the day by the skin of our teeth.
Yep.
Where we barely made it through. But then we just look at each other and go, they're in bed, they're asleep, we're done.
And tomorrow's a new day.
Tomorrow hasn't even happened yet. Let's just go.
Let's just deal with it.
Just go sit on the couch and drink.
Let's just enjoy it. Let's enjoy
what we're gonna do. Just sit on the couch. We'll just put on a movie and we're just gonna recover a little bit. So be patient with yourself, man. Like,
yeah.
Just
man,
be patient with yourself.
I tell you, I've done a lot of podcasts, and I think well, it's not a lot actually. It's a big lie. I think it's about. I think you might be number 20. I think.
Seems like a lot.
I didn't even think I was going to get this far, but it's been so good, and I really appreciate it that you've come on and you've shared the how you are as the dad, how you get through, how you don't get through, because that's like when so I thank you, and I'm so sure that people will enjoy hearing your story. And
I hope so.
openness.
My wife and I are really big on openness with this whole thing. And we want to be as visible as possible to the Japanese culture. One time when my daughter was in the hospital for one of her many illnesses, and my wife was there, one of the nurses came up to her in Japanese and was talking to her, and my wife said, "Oh, she's adopted," and the woman just was shocked, because in Japan you don't take on other people's problems.
Yeah.
So adoption is like, you're taking on someone else's kid. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
She looked at my wife. She looked at Maho, my daughter, who obviously has Down syndrome, started crying. And in Japanese, she was saying, because they're not garbage. They're not garbage. And it's like, yes, exactly it. They're not garbage. They're people. They have just as much value as you or I. Their utility is low. Their utility might be nothing, but they're still valuable people. And you've been, as a man, as a father, you've been entrusted to tend to them. And it's a big job and it's a big responsibility, but my gosh, it's one that you can actually be proud of. That you helped make a person. You helped craft a person, an actual living, breathing being. And that's not small. That's huge. That's gigantic. That's overwhelming to think about. So, I mean, your son in the background there, smiling with his arm around your neck. It's like
he's got me in a headlock.
Yeah,
it's actually a headlock. He famously does the headlock, and this is actually a version of the headlock.
Now that I'm looking at it, your face is a bit pained.
Yeah, yeah. If I just kind of
Yeah.
those on YouTube are watching this, you can actually see. Um, it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's a grin with into pain in there.
Yeah. 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 But he's happy,
Oh,
he's got his dad.
he
And
yeah.
when that hits, like when your son looks at you and it's like, hey, there, my son will just sometimes point to me and go, Daddy.
Oh
It's like
wow, the money moment.
my buddy right there, my buddy, my pal, my
Yeah,
guy right there.
fantastic.
So yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.